made by Marner! Holy mackerel!
It is Gilmore waiting around the net, he's open!
Gilmore! Johnny Toronto! I wonder if they can hear it on Long Island.
Great move! What a goal! Beauty! Austin Matthews!
Bless you, boys! What a game!
Welcome to episode 93 of the Maple Leaf Hot Stove Podcast. I'm Nick Ashbourne, joined as always by Anthony Petrielli and as well by Alec Brownscombe. We have a fuller house for this episode. The Leafs in this period of history don't win playoff series often, so when they do, it's a special occasion. Alec, it's great to have you on.
That's what it took to get Alec out here. I've been
Yeah,
busting his balls all season.
I was going to say,
Anthony
Anthony never invites me, so that's why I'm never on.
Yeah.
We could publish some WhatsApp conversations that would make that a questionable claim. But Alec, we are definitely happy to have you here. And you were at a few of these games for the Battle of Ontario. I do want to start there. We're going to talk in this episode, I think, primarily about where the Leafs go from here, the series upcoming with Florida. But Alec, I know you were in the building for some of these games with the Battle of Ontario. What was your sort of impression of the series overall and kind of how you feel about this team coming out of these 6 games?
Yeah, I was fortunate to go to 2 of the games live. I saw games 3 and 6. So the fact that they didn't sweep was probably my fault for not being in the building. It was kind of extra fun this way though, because it felt like I saw them eliminate the Sens twice in their own barn, because it was kind of like attending the wake and then attending the funeral. Like they knew they were toast at 3-0, and then it was actually the formal burial in game 6. But just like watching it live, like the thing I kept circling back to in those games is that like the Leafs look like a team to me that kind of knows who they are and are comfortable within that this year. Like I know that identity is an overworked term in general, but I think there's a real validity to it when you can see a team that is like clearly bought into what its core principles or its key values are as a team and what its structure is, and has like a real conviction that it'll work out in its favor if they stay true to those values or that structure or those principles. And they don't waver, I think, in times of adversity. Like if you can recall last year, the Leafs were actually, I was looking at this a couple of weeks ago, they're around a bottom 10 team in goals against. They generally played pretty good team defense under Keefe if you zoom out on his tenure as a whole, but they were playing like the loosest brand of hockey they'd played under Keefe last season for large portions of the year. They also mailed it in badly down the stretch in terms of actually nailing down their details before the Boston series arrived. So they started game 1 by giving up a 2-on-1 from the offensive zone blue line in for a goal against, I think it was like 3 or 4 minutes into game 1. They end up going down, losing 5-1 in Boston or whatever it was. They fall behind 3-1 in the series. Keefe says, other teams set up the Leafs to beat themselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, and on a note about Florida, but I'm not to jump ahead, but even thinking back to 2023 when they lost that series, the Panthers really feasted. The Panthers really feasted on a lot of like really loose puck management and defending by the Leafs in that series. To go back to the Boston series, though, like the Leafs woke up in that series and they started to find their structure as the series wore on. But on top of like the power play going ice cold, that's understating matters, is totally inept. It's really hard to beat a good team 3 times in a row, and they couldn't figure out how to score enough in general as they started to check properly and actually figure out the details of their game as the series was going on. By comparison, this year, like the way the Leafs approach their puck management, how they withstand pressure inside their defensive end by defending within structure and boxing out and keeping pucks to the outside, it really stands out in person that even during those waves of pressure that they were sustaining, like they're really bought into what Berube is preaching. Like instead of forcing the issue and beating themselves, they're going to be as patient as needed. They're going to bet on their defensive structure and their goaltending, and they're just going to persist in the belief that they have the scoring talent to break through when the chances come, whether it's on the power play or at even strength. And then when the games were in the actual balance and they needed a push, they were generally able to find that extra gear and sort of assert the superiority they clearly had over the Senators. Thinking specifically about the start of that third period in game 3, I think that was a huge inflection point in the series in general when they had that. They're up 2. They took care of business on home ice, came on the road, had a pretty bad second period. First 40 minutes in general, there's a pretty big push by the Senators at various points. They come out the third period and score within the first minute of a giant push by the top line. that was like the way they kind of responded to adversity between games and within games, where they seem to have this structure and the belief in their structure to fall back on, was generally impressive. Like the only time I maybe got concerned was the first period against the Senators when they had the closeout opportunity at home. But I liked their response in game six. And it was kind of interesting to hear Paul Maurice talk today about what the Panthers learned from the time they beat the Leafs in 2023 and they blew their first closeout opportunity to home. He said that we had to kind of learn what it was going to feel like in sort of our feet and in our puck play to want so badly to finish the job, and have it right there, and then to actually calmly execute your game plan. I think the start of game five to me kind of looked a little bit like that to me from the Leafs in terms of like uncharacteristically nervous, fanning on pucks, just not really getting to their game. So I'm not saying
the Leafs were really good at the beginning of game six.
I thought they settled right down. I'm not saying that this style of play that I just described that they're committing to and the identity that they seem to have formed and really bought into is perfect, or that it's going to be enough to beat Florida. We can get into that. There's definitely some holes to poke in their game. Like when the other team pushes, they often don't break the pressure fast enough. They're sometimes like almost too patient about trying to like sort of hang back. They don't even at times they don't even like try to make a proper breakout play. Like they don't even actually make a play with the puck. They're kind of content to kind of like hang on, survive, chip it out, and we'll live to fight another day. That means that they don't really get a forecheck going at points because they're just sort of flipping pucks back and then changing or falling back into position, and the other team's coming back at them again. So like how that plays out against Florida, I think is a much different conversation maybe than what we saw against the Senators. But by and large, I kind of saw a team that knew what it was this year, that was dialed into its details defensively and wasn't beating itself, and kind of had belief at the end of the day that they were the better team. And I think they proved that ultimately.
And Anthony, you said that it was going to be 4-2 Leafs. I think that was your prediction at the outset of the series. So now that the whole series is over, and it did have the swings with the Leafs going up 3-0 and then losing a couple of games, a little bit of a hysteria. We really covered that in the last episode. We're not going to dive too far into it. But now that you can see the series as a whole, do you feel like it broadly met your expectations considering that that was the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of what I expected when I predicted Leafs in six, and we talked about it in the last episode a little bit prior to going to it, just to say, I think they're the better team. I think they could easily win this series faster than 6 games. I don't fully trust them to close the job and do that. They kind of met all of those pieces. I mean, they easily could have swept them. And as we said, like, I think if Tavares isn't in concussion protocol, I think they probably score on the 4-minute power play. I don't think we have Morgan Riley on the point. I think they just look way better, and it's a clean sweep at that point. Obviously, that's not what happened, and it's, I think the adversity is a bit of a good thing. We talked about it last episode. I still think that's the case now. It's like it's good to get over a little bit of a hurdle before you go and face a much bigger obstacle in the Panthers. And then, some of the things we talked about as well, I think kind of came to light in terms of Craig Berube and his man. Like, this is why they brought him here. Like, they brought him here because he's a cup winning experienced coach. And so far to this point, he has very much felt like a cup winning experienced coach, as opposed to the previous staff, which was a lot of entry level coaches into the league. Right. And like he kind of had this calm demeanor to him throughout the entire time. Like he didn't get high at any point in that series. It was very much like an air of like, we're better than these guys. Like, we know we're better than these guys. Let's just relax and get the job done. And we had kind of talked about that for some of his decision making and the way he was positioning things going into game 6, right? Like, it's like he's not getting mad or calling them out or doing anything. He just very much like, we're still in the lead. Like, we're going to be fine. Everyone pumped the brakes. The players really picked up on that. And the last thing I'll say too, because I think this has kind of come to light a little bit more publicly since we recorded our last podcast. And Alec, you'll know because you transcribed like every interview all season, is there's a lot more talk from Berube, and now it seems to be trickling down into the team about just like the concept of playing for each other, playing for everybody in the room. Like, we're doing this for your teammates, the guy to the left of you, to the guy to the right of you. I like that message. I think that's a powerful message from the coaching staff. We saw Matthews reiterate it after the game to the team before giving the game puck to Scott Lawton. I love that message from the group. I like, Alec talking about on the ice identity and like buy-in. Like I feel like there's a buy-in to that sort of concept. Like I hope it ultimately brings out the best in them, because Florida, like this is, I don't know if there's a tougher team to play in a playoff series right now than the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and Anthony is I don't know if listeners know, is a Seattle Seahawks fan. I'm a big Seattle Seahawks fan. So I'm going to make very briefly a Seattle Seahawks comparison here. But the Seahawks had Pete Carroll as their coach for ever and ever and ever. And they were a pretty successful team most seasons. And there would be times where you would quibble with the coaching philosophies, in terms of he would play cover 3 defense and just be like, we're going to beat you with our superior guys, even though that didn't always seem to make sense. And some of his in-game stuff you wouldn't agree with, but like the energy was really good and the program was a winning program, even with some of these parts within it that you could certainly pick away at. And that's a little bit how I feel about what Berube is with the Maple Leafs right now, where, we can complain about Pontus Holmberg on the second unit, all the time. And we certainly do on this podcast. There are things that he does, the style, Alec, that you kind of referenced at the beginning of the podcast. There are aspects of that can be, for one, frustrating to watch, but also just debatable whether that's the best way to use this exact team that he's left with. But at the end of the day, that sort of demeanor and energy and program that he seems to be building does seem to be an effective program. Now, beating the Ottawa Senators does not mean that you have a championship level program, but it's a good it's a good first sign. If you beat the Florida Panthers, now we're talking about a really good program. But I think the three of us here, none of us are probably feeling super confident that's going to happen. But Alec, I'll throw it to you. Like, where's your confidence level on this next series coming up?
I think it's going to be a little bit higher than probably the general consensus among the fan base. I think maybe people are slightly overrating them as a productive team at 5-on-5. Like, there's
that
I
meaning
know that
Florida or that meaning Toronto?
Florida.
Okay.
Like especially, I mean, there's so many question marks around like how healthy is Tkachuk really? His minutes were way down. I think that second line matchup is maybe something we get into, because I think that's kind of a bit of an X factor in terms of which way that matchup breaks, where it's like if Bennett and Tkachuk are what they can be in terms of their health and their impact at 5-on-5, you could see the Leafs second line losing that matchup pretty handily, but you could also see it flipping entirely if Tkachuk isn't fully there. And when they moved Rodriguez onto that line in that series, it seemed to really help them when they had the kid whose name I can never pronounce on that line, and they were getting tilted.
Just say Mackey.
Yeah, Mackey, right. So like, but at the same time, like Tavares was amazing in that Ottawa series. I thought
he was so good.
Whatever, the Four Nations break was the biggest godsend for him, I think, ever, because if you like remember last year, it was right around that time of year when he hit the skids in terms of production and seemed like he hit a wall. He came out of that Four Nations break like playing like first year in Toronto, Tavares, and has been at that level almost ever since. So it's I think it was a huge blessing in disguise.
And then was really good out of the All-Star break too.
Amazing, yeah.
The year before, and then like this year even longer with the four.
Yeah, with the extended break. Yeah. And then Nylander, of course, he kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit throughout the series for me, but like by and large was on it when it really mattered. You think about the way how aggressive Florida is up the ice on teams, like Nylander being able to get in behind teams as he does, I think is going to be a bit of an X factor there as well, where you could see them counterpunching that. Even if the ice is tilted a little bit, you could see them being fairly productive on the counterpunch. But to get back to the broader 5-on-5 point, which is that I think there was only 3 teams with less 5-on-5 goals in Florida in the playoffs, and they're all out, which were Ottawa, Minnesota, and New Jersey, maybe. And I'm not obviously they were fairly productive against Tampa Bay. There's some weird things going on with Tampa though, in terms of like how awful they are at home ice in the playoffs and have been for a few years now. Like I don't understand what's going on there. They couldn't defend in the first game. Vasilevsky has these weird moments on home ice as well that I don't fully understand what's going on with him. Like there was some gifts in there, and there's some really strange, uncharacteristic defending by a John Cooper team in the early parts of that series, especially. So like I think the Leafs are generally playing a bit more of a lockdown game with better goaltending at this moment than Tampa is. And I think Florida does have, obviously a 3-line threat to them, but I think the Leafs can kind of go toe to toe over the 3 lines up front, like if they're on it. And I think the big X factor there too is just the emergence of that Lawton line, because otherwise I think Florida would have had the clear extra line sort of advantage, but Lawton's line doing what it did and ideally freeing up Matthews' line to some degree here and there, I think is also super helpful at 5-on-5. So the big thing for me is just can they keep special teams in the ballpark of reasonable? Because obviously you'd love to win the special teams battle, but I think it's actually there's a path where the Leafs could edge them at 5-on-5 as long as they keep the special teams respectable. And the Florida PK doesn't just run the show against the Leafs power play. I think that's a huge thing that I'm going to be watching from early on in the series.
Yeah, I think before we get into special teams, like you mentioned, the Kachuk Bennett line, that's such an X factor. It's so, as you know, because I just sent it to you, but just writing the preview and kind of digging into it, it's really unpredictable to figure out how to play it without understanding what version of Matthew Kachuk you're getting. Like he didn't even play 14 minutes a night against Tampa. And, 4 of his 5 points were on the power play. Obviously he's hurt. Now, is he getting better and is he going to be a much better player this round? I have no idea. But if he's like a 13-minute guy that is basically a power play specialist, are you even bothering to put Tavares and Nylander against them? Like at that point, I might just say, I'm going to put Scott Laughton against you guys, and they're just going to be an honest line against them and grind. And then you're putting Tavares and Nylander against the Lundell checking line, which is a really good checking line. It's not to say that that's a slam dunk matchup for the Leafs, but just stylistically, you don't have Tavares and Nylander playing against Bennett running around trying to line them up all night. And they're playing against like Lundell and Lister-Heinonen, who are like, they're good, honest players, but they're not like physically going to impose on them. So that's like what I'm monitoring at 5-on-5 with the matchups. Like, I don't really think there's any escaping the Barkov Matthews. I think it's got to go head to head. The Leafs are paying these guys a ton of money, like just like Florida is. Like, I think that just kind of is what it is. I don't think Barkov and Reinhart going up against Tavares and Nylander is at all what you would want.
Non-starter,
right?
At home.
Yeah,
absolutely not.
So it's like, why would you put yourself in that situation? So it's like those guys got to go head to head. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, then what version of Kachuk are you getting? And depending on the version of Kachuk you're getting, if it's the good one, if it's like he's looking better, then you're going to split McCabe and Tanev up from the top line and put them on defense to play against the Kachuk line, probably with the Tavares unit in front of them. So it's like a little bit, it's always a chess game. Like we talked about it against Ottawa. And now it's Florida. Like playoffs is all about matchups. It's just there's this this like hard factor to kind of sort through when it comes to Florida, just in terms of like, their most explosive player production wise. Like this is like a genuine 100-point guy. Like we have no idea what to expect from him.
Yeah, I mean that's a massive X factor. There's sort of two ways that I'm thinking about this series and this matchup. One of them is that Florida's a hard team. It's weird, but like this is a hard team to pin down what they are. Like they won the Stanley Cup. They were in the Stanley Cup finals the previous year. Like in a sense, we know exactly who they are. But also we haven't seen them with Marchand over a long period of time, that many games. As you mentioned, we don't know exactly where Kachuk is. Seth Jones played well in the first series, but he is a pretty variable guy. When you compare, Bobrovsky regular season to playoffs, and like there's always a level of kind of rolling the dice with him. Obviously, a very good goalie who you're happy to have between the pipes, but he does have odd moments and odd stretches in him, and he does have invincible stretches in him as well. Like I genuinely don't always feel confident that I know what that's going to be. And so like this Florida team was really struggling at the end of the season in part because there was a lot of moving parts around the roster. And I don't know if one series against the Tampa Bay team that should not be happy about how they performed is enough to tell us. Like there's a world where you can kind of like read the names off the page and be like, this is a juggernaut team. Like this is not the best team ever assembled, but like this is an incredible team. You add that level of Marchand and you get Ekblad back, and then you have Jones. And this is building on a roster pretty much that was already immensely successful. There's a reason that you could be really scared of this team, but it hasn't quite been healthy and complete and together in that way. And so I don't know if, like we said before, the best round to face Florida would be the first round. Well, the second best round to face Florida might
Nobody
be
told Tampa. I'm not happy
Yeah.
with their performance. I expected
No,
more
I
from
mean
Tampa.
that was a brutal performance by Tampa. But like the second best time to face Florida might be the second round. You know what I mean? Because it hasn't necessarily totally coalesced. And then the other thing, like, and this is arguably not the way to think of, but I think it's the way a lot of Leafs fans will, is to sort of compare to what happened when they played Florida 2 years ago in the playoffs, because largely the cores of these teams are pretty much the same. And so like what might be different this time around, where, you know, they scored exactly 2 goals in each game. It was not a good series for them. I think it felt pretty inevitable for Florida relatively early in the series. And so like I'm thinking about that team and this team and what's different and what could lead to a different result. And so like when the big downside is the lack of Ryan O'Reilly, right? Like adding O'Reilly to that team was a different element that helped you lengthen that lineup. But you know, you've got goaltending that you feel far more confident in right now. Like you have Woll, you can bring in relief just like you did in that series, but instead of Samsonov, you've
I don't
got
know. Do we need
Stolar.
to compare to 20? Like half the teams are different for both groups.
I think that, but the top of, like, first of all, the top of the rosters are pretty much the same. And like we always talk about how it's the top of the rosters who have to do it. And secondly, I think this is the experience people are having. I'm going to bring it around. I promise you I'm going to bring it around.
Okay.
But the other one small point of pushback as well is like style, like on top of the roster turnover, outside of obviously the handful of core players, it's like stylistically the series is going to be played so much differently than that one was played in terms of like the Leafs. I Anthony may remember this better than me, but I'm going to go ahead and guess the Leafs had more of the puck in that 2023 Florida series. If you looked at it
Yeah,
statistically,
I went to game 2. They were up 2-0, 10 minutes in. The Reno was rocking, and then
the
they
Leafs
just
fed their they had that ridiculous start to the third period in that one game that really sort of flipped the whole series in a way. And
Yeah.
they gave them tons of free offense. That Florida hit them on the rush quite a bit. I think you're going to see stylistically such a different series play out in terms of like the Leafs.
It's going to be grindy.
It's going to be way
No,
more. The Leafs have embraced a totally different identity since those teams.
The one thing I
look at
wanted
some
to
of their
add-
goals. Declare breakaway off of the end of a power play, like right in, because Justin Holl couldn't manage. The Carter Verhaeghe breakaway from like center, from like his own blue line. I think that one was Timothy Liljegren. 3-on-2 Carter Verhaeghe. That one was Timothy Liljegren. The 3-on-2 in overtime to win it on the Nick. It was like these were like practice drill rushes the equivalent of a practice drill rush to me is like when you get half the ice to go down. Like Florida was lining up from center. They'd be like, I got a breakaway.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Liljegren because it's the defense is the biggest difference. And Alec, you make a good point in terms of like the way you're playing defense stylistically. Absolutely. But when people have nightmares about Florida, those nightmares are about that relentless forecheck, about them getting it deep. And, you know, they led the NHL in hits, but it's not even like literally the hits statistic. Who cares? They're like super tough on the forecheck. They go in there, they pound your defenseman, they get the puck back. And when I do think about the Leafs defense core, like it is bigger, it is stronger, it is more capable of withstanding. Like I think about a guy like Carlo. Carlo is a perfect addition for a series like this. Tanev is less sort of rugged physically, but how good is he at taking a hit and moving the puck quickly on a short area pass? Like
boxing out.
Yeah, and boxing
Yeah.
out. Like, you know, playoff Benoit, you know, maybe more of an offensive defenseman at this point. But in theory, when he has its moments, yeah, sometimes it's just him taking the body, letting the puck go around. I do think that is a big difference when we think about what Florida is really good at, what they're scary with, and how the Leafs can counter, is that they do have this new look defense core that should be able to weather that a little bit better than we've sometimes seen from this matchup in the past, in the playoffs, and then in the regular season, you know, pre-Carlo.
Without baking it too much compared to 2023, the other thing, which I didn't even write about it really, but it's noteworthy, is Sheldon ran 11-7 for a good chunk of those games.
Yeah.
So
Like,
wild.
Like the Panthers are a four-line team. Like they want to come at you hard. Like they take quick hard shifts, they forecheck like crazy, and 11 forwards, and like, you know, Sam Lafferty was one of them. David Kampf, even post Gudis annihilation, was one of them. Like it, like a bit of a different vibe when like if we're looking and saying, okay, well, the defense is deeper. It's weird because I'm not necessarily saying the forwards are deeper because they had Ryan O'Reilly in 2023, but Berube uses them different. Like he empowers like a four-line team where everyone is contributing, which we saw against Ottawa. And Sheldon just never really believed in that. Like that was crystal clear his entire time here. Maybe that'll change eventually in Jersey. I don't know. But as long as he was here, it was always just about the top guys. Whereas Berube has very much tried to push back on that as much as possible. And then like we look at that Ottawa game 6, like one guy played over 20 minutes. Like Matthews didn't even play 19 minutes that game. I think the lowest forward was like 12 minutes that night. Like that was like a just a pure like we're rolling them. It's a big game. We need contributions from everybody, and that's
You
what
could
they
really
got.
feel it. You could really feel it when they're defending leads late too, in terms of you used to see Matthews and Marner just having emptied the tank and
Yeah,
still getting thrown over the boards time and time again under Keith. And the same is true on the blue line, by the way. I thought OEL was incredible in that series by and large, and like any given night, he
he
could play the
was
least of anybody on the decor.
he was
Like
sick.
that,
He was really
I
good.
meant to mention that in the opening bit about what things I noticed in person was just how much I loved OEL's game. And then you'd go and look, and you'd be like, he had played the fifth most on the decor, and you're like, yeah, this is how you know you actually have some real depth going on. And that's the type of thing that could be a durable in terms of an actual run. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. It's the hardest matchup they ever could have drawn, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm really curious as well to see, like, I'm probably going to read more into the start of game one than I should, just because the point you made earlier about Berube and the way he just kind of stated completely even keeled and said, like, this isn't the first time I've lost a playoff game in my life. Like, what are we talking about here? That plays great when you get the job done. When you don't, it seems like you didn't inject the necessary urgency and
Yeah,
the team fell apart. But I think on a similar note, I don't know if you guys heard the quote today where he said Steve Simmons rolled into the scrum and asked um, about how mean Florida is, whether it's the meanest team he's ever seen in the
yeah.
playoffs or
Are they
something along
mean?
some, and he just
Are they
immediately
mean?
goes, "Are they mean?" Like I played for the '80s Flyers. I don't know. Are they mean? Like that kind of attitude? I think, in one sense, I think it's awesome. But if they come out and they get absolutely tilted and they get clearly intimidated out of the series, kind of like they did in 2023, then obviously it plays like he didn't take the situation seriously enough. So I'm really curious to see, because like all this talk, like I was reading a Tree Living interview where he came out and said, like, the very first thing he said when he got hired was basically like, there's certain things you need to get you to the playoffs, and there's certain things you need to get through the playoffs, and we need to be a team that doesn't just respond but actually initiates physicality. I'm really curious, now that they go out against a team that is known for that, what it looks like early in the game game one on home ice.
And they did do
And
that the game one against the Sens. Like they came out flying.
yeah,
Like they
exactly. And do they do the same thing? Do they get a little bit intimidated by the situation, et cetera, et cetera? What does it look like? Or do they kind of embrace that Berube mentality of like, these guys are nothing to fear? Like
with
that's what I'm hoping we see.
without crowning Burby too much, like they've won a round. Like I'm not gonna like
And a
lose my
round they
mind.
very much should have
Yeah,
won
and they
too.
should have.
Not
Yeah,
like a round against a
that,
opponent that was like at your level, very, very
that
good, and
that was
whatever.
not an upset that took place. That is for
No,
sure.
this is the type
But
of series that happens like 4 times in the course of the playoffs. It just we're in Toronto. That's what.
yeah, and but there is an element of like humanizing the Panthers, right? Like I find myself looking at it
Yeah.
sometimes too, going like, man, these guys are a wagon. Like this is a really good team. But then, like Alec is talking about their 5-on-5 scoring, and I'm looking at it, it's like Bennett Kachuk this year at 5-on-5, like outscored opponents 26-24. Like that's not good. Like it's not bad, but it's not good. Like the full Barkov line with Reinhardt and Verhage, their goal, there was like 15-10. Like, yes, it was great that they only allowed 10 goals at 5-on-5, but scoring 15 is not good. Like that, like,
The Panthers were 15th in goals scored overall this season. Like they were
yeah,
dead average
yeah,
offensively.
they're the fairly average offensive team. Like they check really
What was
well.
it at 5-on-5? Was it
Ooh, I don't know.
21st or something?
It was probably lower because
Yeah,
power
their
play is
power play
solid.
is actually good.
Yeah.
Like their
Yeah.
power play is respectable. Their penalty kill is really good. I think they frustrate teams. physically. It's like what we're saying about the Panthers physically, like that's not exclusive to the Leafs. Like, how do you think Carolina feels? Like Bennett destroyed Slavin in
Yeah.
Carolina. Like, yeah, all these teams don't like them. The only one that can say that they got the better of them is Vegas. And even then, Kachuk lit up Eichel in that series. So
22nd at 5-on-5, Alex. So yeah,
yeah, like you
right
gotta
behind the Anaheim Ducks.
you gotta break them down a little bit that way and like look at some things and say, like there's paths here to beating these guys, but the hardest part of it is like Bob gets in teams' heads. Like he's done this a number of times in his career, including I thought against the Leafs, like you're mentioning that third period where they came out and like Bob is the kind of guy, and I thought actually this happened in the first round with Stolars at one point with Ottawa, where he makes shooters start second guessing whether they should shoot.
Yeah.
And like that's going to be a big test for these guys because Bob's going to have some games. Like they're not going to roll this guy over. Like he's going to have some superhuman stretches. So like how do they stick with it in those scenarios? Like can they get to the traffic? Like you're talking about guys that like get you through. It's like they gotta bang home some greasy goals. They gotta find those kinds of ways. Like I think Nyes has a whole different level that he's got to reach. Like I thought he was good in the first round. I think he's maybe my expectations are too high for him. I don't know. Like I think he has a whole other level. Like I think he can inflict pain like nobody else on their forward group can. Like I didn't see it in the first round. I think they're going to need that from him though in the second round.
Yeah, because I think the front of the net's going to be a lot harder place to play than it was in the last one.
Yeah,
Like you look at the Sens decor mix. It's I was really impressed by Clevin, and he's a pain to play against. But by and large, the decor there was not like the most punishing group you're going to face in terms of getting to the hard areas of the ice.
It's a
Right?
nice way of putting it.
Yeah, that's probably understating it.
Yeah.
This decor on Florida is not that.
No.
So that's where you need top of the lineup. You need Nyes dragging those two into the fight that way. You need him creating problems at the front of the net to a lesser extent. If Pacioretty's going to play on line two, if McMahon's going to play on line two, and they got to really, really dig in on that part of the game as well. Because you're looking back to, I know the 2023 comparison, we kind of poo-pooed it for lots of good reasons, but like they didn't have those elements either. They didn't have the decor, but they also didn't have Matthew Nyes on the team. Like, frankly, I would take Bobby McMahon over Michael Bunting in a playoff series too. And I understand Bobby McMahon didn't have a great first round, but
no,
I like doing game six. I think he's trending up. I think he's going in the right direction as my pet.
100% would take Bobby McMahon in a playoff series over Michael Bunting. No questions asked.
That's valid.
And I think that's the other thing too, is like what you're saying, like Bob can be a bit of an X factor. You can get in your head. The game within the game in general is a big thing against Florida too, right? The sideshow antics, the physical, the shenanigans, that whole part of it. It's like the between the whistles thing is kind of a simplistic way of looking at the way you need to handle a team like Florida. Like I think you need to have savvy and discipline about the way you respond and when you turn the other cheek, right? Like if you skate down the ice and put a puck on net for a nothing play and a whistle, and Bennett or Marchand buzz you just to buzz you at the whistle to see if you can lose your cool or your discipline, that's not a time to respond. That's when you need to skate away and not engage. If Bennett tests you by skating directly into your goaltender on purpose and you don't respond, that's the type of shit that adds up and it starts to get away from you, right? So it's about having your head about you, and I think Berube's messaging, I think, is probably the better one publicly when he talks about not engaging, but they do need to engage to a certain extent. Otherwise, you kind of lose control of things like they did in 2023. Anthony laid it out really well in his piece if you guys haven't read it yet, but the ways in which they got punked in that series and didn't have an adequate physical response definitely didn't help. And you have Ryan O'Reilly, a guy who captained the team to a cup, come out and say like, oh, they just ran us over. They basically said that after the series. Like, yeah, no, they just ran us over. We weren't ready for it, and we lost the series. That's basically what he said.
It's the hardest thing with Florida, and Florida's won 8 of their last 9 playoff series. Like they're the best playoff team going in the league right now. I don't think that that's an unfair thing to say or an over exaggeration. And then they added Brad Marchand this year, another like winner, serial winner. Seth Jones not a serial winner, but like he's a helpful player. Like, they got better. Sam Bennett, I heard him say like months ago, was like, this team's like actually better than our team that won the cup last year. And on paper you can see it, but
You can make a case.
right, like it's there for you if you want to argue it. And then so you talk about like all these X's and O's, like breaking the Florida forecheck and like trying to solve Bob and like all these things. And then there's like this other complete thing to consider, which is like I can't sit here and say, Brad Marchand's going to throw a water bottle across the ice again to signal the ref and change a call, or Bennett's going to like knock out Knies behind the net for the series. Like I can't predict what's going to happen, but like they need to be adults and address these things in the right ways. And like depending on what the scenario is, like if you're getting run by Bennett, like I'm telling you, like put your stick up and get him in the face. Like don't, like there's times where it's like don't take that hit. Like you're not, like you shouldn't really take that hit. Like protect yourself, right? And then there's other times where it's going to be like you probably have to take the hit. It's going to suck.
Yeah, Ridley Gregg against
yeah,
Barnes.
right. Yeah, like that's a time to take the hit.
That's pathetic.
That is not the time to put your stick up. But then there's going to be other times like it's the finest line with them because they can blow up a series. Potentially, they have a few guys anyways that can with their physicality. And then, some people might think that kind of stuff's overblown. But I look at the first round, like Tom Wilson essentially ended the series. He destroys Carrier, like just destroys him. And they score right after. And it was done. Like that was curtains on the Habs. Like that can be a factor. So
people don't want to play Florida for a reason, and that reason isn't exclusively because they're good at hockey.
Yeah,
they also don't want to. It's going to be painful. It's going to be literally painful to play Florida.
You have Hagel taking the post game after the series or post series presser clean out day, and he's right to be upset. I would be upset. Anyone would be upset, right? But you have Hagel sitting there complaining about the concussion that he received, as again, not blaming him. He should. And Florida's getting ready for the second round. Like that's what they do. Like that's very much involved, like in the fabric of how they play. They took the 2-game suspension for Aaron Ekblad. They don't care. Ekblad's probably going great. Another mini training camp. Like just more freshen up my legs for the next round. Feel good about myself.
I mean, for there isn't a calmer, cooler coach in the league than John Cooper, and he looked absolutely beside himself. A mix of disgusted and angry in a way that I'd never seen him look on a bench before. That's what they can do to you if you're not careful, right?
Yeah.
So you knew. So beyond just like talking about initiating versus reacting and what you do in certain circumstances when they try to drag you into that nonsense, but it's also like you need to protect yourself. Like Matthew, like you want Matthew Knies to be really physically assertive in this series, but he's probably not going to forget what happened with Sam Bennett, nor should he. They need to be extra vigilant on the ice as well. Like, because they could the Florida Panthers have piled up the bodies over the years in terms of guys that they've eliminated from series, whether they're still playing or not. They're barely there because of injuries they've taken. So that's an important subplot. Like it sounds like it's kind of a small thing, but it's a big thing. Another couple, by the way, on that note, I was thinking about a couple small things, but big things for the series in general. I think let's talk about what happens at the start of the first game. I'd also really love to see the Leafs bury a few odd man rushes or breakaways. Anthony mentions this in a piece coming up, but it was like kind of talked about throughout the season as well in terms of the amount of breakaways and odd mans Florida will give up because they're so aggressive up the ice. When Nylander it's probably going to be Nylander or whoever it is gets that chance early. If they could get a couple of those to go in early, I know Florida is not an easy team to force off their game in terms of they've had so much success with it. They're not going to easily abandon what's gotten them here, but psychologically it will have some sort of effect. It will start to take the sting a little bit out of the pressure in the forecheck that they are going to apply to you. If you can hit them a few times on the quick strike, they will have a few opportunities early in the series, I think, as Florida is fired up and comes running out the gates at them and comes at them with reckless abandon. They're going to have a couple looks. If they could bury a few of those early, it would somewhat change the complexion of the series early on in their favor.
And I was at the Leafs-Panthers game April 2nd, so I got a good view of it in the arena. But Florida was so tight on the Leafs wingers in the neutral zone. They were jumping pucks constantly. And that led to that second period where they just got dominated. We talked about it after Nick, where I was like, I don't know why they got actively outplayed by this like shell of it. Like I know why, because I saw it, but like they shouldn't have been actively outplayed by a Panthers team that was a shell of themselves, but their defense was super tight in the neutral zone. And they just they showed no respect for the Leafs wingers or their team's ability to make an outlet pass. And they jumped every puck and they were just shoving it down their throat. And then in the third period that game, they actually did score on an outlet pass on a breakaway. And that ended up being the game winner. It was a Mitch Marner pass, not by a D-man. But yeah, to your point, like, I think that also applies to the power play. Like we're talking about nonsense by the Panthers. If your power play is not scoring, you're going to get tampa'd. They went 2 for 18 against the Panthers, and the Panthers just did whatever they wanted. Like that is catnip to them. They love that. If they're sitting there going, we're going to kill off these penalties anyways, we're going to take our runs and live with the consequences, they don't care.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it sounds a little bit too Sheldon Keefe coded to be like our power play is going to be our counter against this physicality, but like it is a very real thing. We saw how it affected the Ottawa series.
Whoa, Nick, we're not saying that. I'm definitely not saying their power play is their toughness. I'm saying like if you're going to get run, like put your stick in the guy's face, but you also have to make them pay on the power play.
But it is something that factors into tampering the amount of shenanigans another team can get away with. Like I think we saw it in the Ottawa series, like they were so electric on the power play early in that series that it did affect the way that Ottawa played the game, and it forced their opponent to be a little bit more cautious. And as you guys mentioned, Florida has almost infinite proof of concept for the way they play the game. It is going to be very hard to make them think differently about certain things, but if the Leafs are able to score on, 3 of their first 9 power plays in the series or something like that does make an enormous difference. I mean, obviously make an enormous difference in terms of the outcomes of the game, but I do think it makes a difference in terms of the flow of the play. And that, that is, we've discussed it before, like this is the formula for the team. It is scoring on the power play, and generally speaking, it's winning with goaltending. And it sounds kind of crazy to be like, the Leafs are going to win with goaltending with the guy who was Bobrovsky's backup against Bobrovsky. But like you can also make a case for it too, right? Like just how good Stolarz has been this season. Like we talk about Bobrovsky's, he's kind of like a mystical figure. And like I get it because he's accomplished so much in his career. But like last playoffs, 906 save percentage. This regular season, 905. This playoffs, 901. We know that there's magic in him. I'm not trying to dismiss that he's like a bad player or anything, but he has not been this like otherworldly force recently. And we'll see how it goes. Like, we're not going to have a lot of success predicting goaltending play. We've seen what happened with Connor Hellebuyck. It's impossible to do. I guess maybe you can predict it with Connor Hellebuyck because it always seems to go the same way. But I don't think that I don't think Bobrovsky's an unstoppable force. And there's a lot of reason to believe that Stolarz is someone who gives them potentially like a little bit of an edge in the series, as wild as that sounds based on the names alone.
The other little silver lining, like little possible crack I could see the Leafs being able to exploit when we're just talking, like I think this is going to be decided on the razor thin margins that a lot of playoff series between elite teams is the Leafs were far and away the best faceoff team in the playoffs in the first round. Like, not even close. 57, 56, 57%. I don't believe Ottawa was that bad of a faceoff team during the regular season. I could be wrong about that, but I think they were actually respectable. They like the next best team is like 52%. Leafs are like 56 plus. So we saw them score a bunch of goals directly off of faceoffs, power play goals, and the OT winner in game 3 included. I think Florida actually lost the faceoff battle against Tampa. They were a bottom 10 to 12 team in that category in the regular season.
Ottawa was 4th in the league in faceoff percentage this year.
There you go. Even better than I thought. So Leafs have been one of the top teams in that all year. And like Matthews and JT are elite at it. Lawton is really good at it as well. And Domi's respectable. Like he actually usually comes out on the right side of it more often than not.
He's sneaky good at it.
Yeah, sneaky good at it. It's going to be a really tight series. If they can maintain kind of a notable advantage there and start with the puck more and create some more offenses off of it, ideally, those little margins can add up and help the fact that like probably Florida is going to break out pucks a little bit better in 5-man units than them and forecheck a little bit better than Toronto is. If they can start with the puck more often than not, it's the little margins at 5-on-5 will add up. So hopefully I think it's something to keep an eye on.
And on the power play, right? Like they scored a
Yeah.
ton of their power play goals off faceoffs, and we've talked about it for like the Panthers PK, like how that I think that goes to their confidence in terms of their physicality. Paul Maurice has talked about it for like a year and a half now. Basically, like they need to get their PK in order, and then they did, and then he gave a lot of credit to that for their cup. And then he further talked about it after the trade deadline this year. It's like we added more PKers to the mix. Like this is a huge part of our identity and what we're doing. And then, Tampa has a great power play. Like Nikita Kucherov is usually one of the best power play players in the league. And I say usually because I watched that entire series and Cooch maybe made 3 good decisions on it the entire series. Like he was unbelievably bad on the power play. And so like the face-off part plays into it. And then I think there's like this Leaf part where Florida's super aggressive, like almost to a level of disrespect how aggressive they are. And I thought Ottawa was also pretty aggressive early, not
But they
at
adjusted, right?
and they adjusted and they started
Yeah.
packing the house because the Leafs just burned them too many times. And the Leafs need to get there again against an even more aggressive, better unit so as to say, like, you can't be doing this to us. Like I'd like
Which
to
is
see
like the five forward unit has to be like dialed in through
yeah,
if they're going to play minute 30 shifts. Like Florida has, they don't just have Reinhardt and Barkov, which is an absolute
they'll-
handful, but they have depth to what they do on the PK because they can go like Sturm was brought in as elite PKer, as you said.
yeah. He
Luster
leads them
Ryan's
in
pretty good there.
he
Yeah, he
leads them in
leads them in it.
shorthanded time
So
on ice per game so
they're going
far.
to roll those guys over and stay really fresh and be really aggressive on you early. If they're not dialed in with their puck management and then like they're out, they extend shifts too long and their brains get tired and their feet get tired and they give something up, like they're gonna have to be really careful about how they walk that line. Like even Marchand, great PK, like they've got a
Yeah.
lot of depth to what they do on the PK. So it's not just like survive. Like the five forward unit has to be really careful about managing the puck and also their shifts and not overextending it if they are, gassed. That's going to be massive. Like if they, I keep looking at the numbers and I'm like, if they can just have a respectable showing on the power play, there's a bigger path here than maybe the general hockey world's going to attribute to the Leafs.
The
in
funny
terms of
thing
how they,
is, like Florida was third in the league in shorthanded goals this year.
yeah,
And I constantly look at it and go like, man, like it can't be close. Like it can't be like Florida scores 2 and the Leafs score 3.
yeah,
But like they
yeah,
got to outscore them by like 4 or 5. And I'm sitting there going, why am I talking about them outscoring the Panthers PK? But they give up a few against Ottawa. And like, admittedly, they didn't give up a ton of chances. Those were basically the only chances they gave up. But like they were a
yeah,
breakaway and a clear 2-on-1. And Florida loves it. And to your point, they're going to be coming out fast and furious. Like their best bet is like legitimately it's winning the faceoff and dominating possession against one unit.
yeah.
Like it's a big and like they can't get outworked. Like I think too many guys, I think this is at like every age and level of hockey. I think guys like they hear power play and they're like, great, I'm gonna chill on the half wall and like, try to float like a backdoor sauce play to a guy and let's see if like we can make like a little give and go. And Florida doesn't allow you to like sit there and think to yourself, like, where do I want to go with this puck? Like that's what Cooch wanted the entire first round, and they never gave it to him. Like you have to outwork the PK. And then to your point, that's even harder to do when they're playing them so quickly, which is what the Leafs are now trying to do as well. I thought the Leafs PK was actually like I actually thought their numbers didn't do them justice against Ottawa. I thought the Leafs
Yeah.
PK was quite good.
Yeah, I think you finally seeing Lawton make a difference there, like in the 4-on-3 situation, the 5-on-3 situation in particular. Like he was really, really
was
They
really
strong
good
kid
in
in
that
five on
they
spot.
five.
kid gloved him there for way too long. He's a
It's
super
crazy.
capable PKer.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like he's extremely established in this space. I mean, it's not like, he was the guy leading the Flyers to the best PK unit of all time or anything, but like he was consistently, if not their top guy, like one of their top 2 guys in ice time for forwards.
How many times did I say it, Nick? Like, oh, he needed months to like figure out the masterful system that Lane Lambert's running. Like he's never seen a PK before. Like the Flyers were like second in the league on the PK last year. Like, give me a break. Like, just put him on. Now you're seeing it. Like he's a good PKer. Like he was unreal on that 5-on-3. They didn't score on him. They scored on Marner, who I thought was actually a little slow to follow Giroux. It was it was just like a weird goal in general. You're not going to blame Marner on or anyone really on a 5-on-3, but like Lawton was really good on the
Yeah, it's
PK.
fantastic.
Like That, one of the goals was Carlo off a skate. That Stützle one-timer was just a bad goal. That's the
Yeah,
kind
it
of
has to be
stuff.
stopped.
Like Stolarz can't be doing that. I don't think there's any use in us arguing about like who should start or anything like that. Like to me, I think it's clear as day you start Stolarz. I'm getting this question a lot though from people. Like
That's odd to me.
it's 3 days off. He's 31. Like he's not like a leper. He's fine.
He's not Max Pacioretty. He'll be okay.
Yeah, like that's more than enough time off. And like to me, you're kind of in a situation where it's like, if you don't start him, if I was Stolarz, I'd be like, we just won the series. I played all 6. Like, what are you doing? Like, I wouldn't take kindly to that. I'm sure he's a team player. I'm sure he would bite his tongue. I'm saying that's how I would respond. And ultimately, if I was the goalie of the Toronto Maple Leafs, I would also bite my tongue. But like deep down, I'd be like, this doesn't make any sense. But if Stolarz struggles in game 1, I think you could easily go to Woll in game 2 if you really wanted to like extend it and like play out that scenario, and then like go back to Stolarz again in game 3 and be like, you get a 5-day break, like reset kind of thing. I just like Stolarz, the overarching point of how I brought up is like Stolarz, I think, does need to be a little bit better. Like Perron scored on him behind the goal line. That Stützle one-timer was like center
Awful.
net. Like that can't go in. And it's not like Stützle has a bomb. There were a few, right? Like the Batherson goal in game 1. And like the Leafs blew it open in the second, but like that opened the door for Ottawa. Like a better team does better with that. Like that was a weak goal. It was weak on all accounts, but like he was weak in how he battled for that puck. It didn't matter against the Senators. It would matter against Florida, though.
If they get the same level of goaltending from him that they got in round 1, they will almost certainly lose a series. Like it's almost impossible to imagine them getting that level of goaltending, which was like at best average. If they get that, they're not going to win. But to be fair, I think there's every reason to believe that he'll give them more than that, because that's what he showed them over the course of the season, is that he's capable of giving them more than that. I think he deserves a benefit of the doubt. I think there's only one game that was like really nasty for him. So yeah, I think rest, refresh, come back. And it's just, it's great to have Joseph Woll as a card in your back pocket. Like most teams go into the playoffs and like, oh, I'm going to bring Eric Comrie in. Like that's going to change our fortunes. Like that's going to be the difference.
If Florida rolls out Vitek Vanacek at any point, the Leafs are going to feel really good about it, as they should.
The Leafs will be up 3 or Rob will be hurt.
Yeah,
be one of the
right?
two.
Yeah, that's it. Like there's no scenario where he goes in. Like it's Bob. So like the Leafs have a card here to play. I would just sit on it. Like I don't know if that's a controversial. I don't know, Alec.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, unless Alec, you're in a different spot with it.
No, I think you're just creating a completely unnecessary story to do it for game 1. It'd just be asinine to do it. I think it's correct to say there's a 1-game leash, assuming an actually bad performance. Yeah. Like it's a 1-game leash still for me, because in I don't know, what is it, 4 to the 6 games, there's like a genuinely soft goal from Stolarz. Like he wasn't unimpeachable by any means. So it was like, and it is an asset to have 2 goalies. It's just like if you were going to do the Jim Montgomery thing from the beginning and say, I rolled it all regular season, I'm going to do it in the playoffs too, that'd be one thing. But the fact that you went with him all the way through and he got it done for you when the series was on the line, and then you just make a pivot on game 1 of the next series would just be you'd be making a story out of nothing. I don't think it would benefit the team. I don't think Joseph Woll is likely to deliver some sort of like Woll. You do have to consider the fact that Woll hasn't, like, when he's come back from long layoffs, as any goalie would, it hasn't always gone well. Like the reason why Ilya Samsonov started in the Boston series was because Joe Woll came back from an injury and struggled. And he hasn't been injured. He's been practicing and so on and so forth. But when did he last start? It's
April
a while
18th,
now.
April 18th. So.
And then by the time he would start, it would be May 8th or whatever it would be. So it'd be like
2.5, 3 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not, you don't invite that in unless it's absolutely necessary. And we're not even close to that in my view.
No,
I mean, part of the whole Berube calmness, taking things day by day, not overreacting aspect has been keeping the lineup steady, right? Like we talked a lot about how he should go to Nick Robertson instead of Pacioretty in game 6. He ultimately didn't do that. And by sending that message of like, this is the group of guys I believe in, that ended up being effective. Obviously, Pacioretty played a pretty
good call, Craig. My
yeah,
bad.
well done. Yeah, but he played a pretty big role in that. So yeah, to go away from Stolars is creating kind of, as you alluded to, Alec, a level of unnecessary instability when you've just won behind this aura of calmness and being businesslike. And then you're like, Florida panic. Like it's just probably
Yeah.
not the way to go about it.
Berube's ability to kind of block out the noise and be fairly decisive in his decision making and not kind of like mess around with anything, at least so far, has been a story to me. Like I didn't see that. I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't see that coming. Especially early on when he was hired, right? Like a lot of people build him to be this like tough, mean, no nonsense, won't take any crap coach. I'm not saying he doesn't do at least some of those things, but I actually think what's distinguished him compared to the previous coach is his decisiveness, his confidence, like what he's kind of exuding to the team, like mentally. Like, I'm not talking about stylistic things. I'm just talking about kind of what he's brought to the table elsewhere. There's not much ambiguity, and like, he's not entertaining conversations of like, well, Florida's mean, and then getting like a 5-minute soliloquy on the Panthers and their history. It's like, are they mean? Okay. Right.
Yeah, I think I love that answer. It will age terribly if they get
Yeah,
totally
if they got
bullied.
It
bullied,
turns out they're
serious.
mean. Turns
If
out
they
they're
got
pretty mean.
bullied, yeah, it's
But I
gonna
also
be
don't
bad.
think I also think Berube's experienced enough and as a player and a coach to not be naive about that fact in the back of his mind as he's saying that. There's a purpose to the reason why he's downplaying it. And I think it's a good one. I think just in general, the way he handles this particular group of players, I think it shows why you should have never had a rookie head coach coaching this particular core of players from the beginning
In this market.
in this market. Yeah. Because a lot of times Keefe would come out after when Keefe would come out after some of those early playoff series, it's almost like he was like a fan of the game who just came up and was like, wow, playoff hockey it's really something. It's so fast out there, it's so physical.
Wow.
I can't have like a rehash of this. Like I can't. Like,
But it's illustrative in the
yeah.
contrast to what we currently have here.
Yeah.
And I think just as a temperament, not talking X's and O's or strategy or anything, as a temperament, I think it suits the market well. And to your point, he's been a little bit more cagey and I think a good PR steward of the team than what I thought he would be. Because in St. Louis, he was a bit more off the cuff. He would call guys out in the media when he was pissed, et cetera, et cetera. You don't get
Someone had a chat with him.
he doesn't throw an ounce of red meat to the media here, ever.
Yeah.
Someone had a chat with him. Someone said like, hey, like you're not in St. Louis anymore. Like, like a Tuesday press conference on like a practice like game day skate is going to get more attention than like a primetime interview you do in St. Louis. Like you can't be doing that. And to his point, or to his like credit, like he's kind of pushed it along so far. Like, got to give him that. So
And like his sort of not saying negative, and like it's not like he's never said anything negative about players, but it's more in the realm of like this guy should be picking it up, not like this guy's a bum and he's gonna play 10 minutes tomorrow, or like I'm benching this guy. And sometimes like Keefe would be like really positive, and it's like sometimes literally the words that Berube would say could be similar, but instead of radiating a positivity that doesn't seem authentic to what's going on the ice necessarily, like it's more of a nonchalance. And like that nonchalance I feel like is very valuable in this market where narratives can boil very quickly and spiral out of control. And like really, thinking back on the Ottawa series, they had one bad game in game 5. Like they had a stinker of a game that, and to be fair, it was reminiscent of other stinkers they've had in similar spots. But it was really this one stinker of a game, and that was enough to get that machine going. And that was just like a demonstration of how potent that machine is. And Berube has been able to, rise above that, ignore that, or like, I'm sure he hears it, but just understand that the best way to deal with that is to not really give it any kind of response whatsoever. Skating away, he skates away from the scrum. He doesn't engage in that way.
And
The one thing I would say
lies.
is that I don't want to totally discount how the player leadership has evolved on the team as well. Like,
Yeah.
to try to put you in the building a little bit when the Sens tied that game at 2-2 in the third period of Game 6, with the Leafs having lost 2 games in a row. I don't want to give Sens fans credit, but I have to give them credit, because the roof almost came off the place. You could feel like it felt like they had every reason to lose their composure in that environment.
And
every
then
reason
what happened?
But also we know what happened, but also listen to Berube talk about what was happening there, which is he gets asked, what did you do? What did you say on the bench when it was 2-2? He said, I literally didn't say anything. The player leadership group we have here, the voices I heard from Tanev and McCabe and these guys about just getting back to our game was all that needed to be said. And I think any honest, humble coach would admit that when you have that player leadership dynamic going on, then you really have something cooking. When you don't actually have to be the one that calms your team down or fires your team up, whatever the circumstances demand. When you have a player leadership group that can do that for you, and you just stand there on the bench and go, yeah, these guys can do it. That's when you can actually maybe win something in the league. I'm not saying they're going to, but
yeah, there's a veteran group here that
they've augmented that piece of it.
Has done a good job. I do think, to their credit, Matthews and Marner in particular have really matured on that side of things. I think Willie is just like his own unique guy.
You don't have to worry about Willie.
Yeah,
he's in his own lane, and he's
and
thriving.
He loves that lane.
It's fine.
He loves that lane, and that's great. I think Matthews and Marner though have really kind of come together in terms of who they are as veteran leaders, and understanding of what matters and what needs to be done. I think those things go hand in hand though. They have a veteran coach who's won and comes with a certain level of respect, who's, I'm sure, helped them along the way this year, and also just the natural maturation of players getting older, having gone through experiences. Also congrats to Mitch for becoming a father today. We're recording, I guess, on the day that happened. So kudos to him. Hope his whole family and everything is all good, and maybe even some a little dad boost. That would be, I have no analysis on that, but dad boost would be beneficial.
I will say sometimes the opposite happens. There was, in 2024, on the Blue Jays side of things, there was a disproportionate amount of guys who became dads at the same time, and it did not go well. But I'm not going to assume that's going to happen for Mitch. Different situation. I mean, that moment that you mentioned, Alec, I think the listeners of this podcast, a huge percentage of Leafs fans just had that horrible feeling in their gut. You got to be kidding me. A puck off the back of the helmet into the goal. And this is one where the Leafs are going to let it slip. Just that negativity, the doomerism that surrounds this franchise for reasons that are valid, but it is what it is. And you just don't get the feeling that is in the players. And that makes a huge difference, because there have been times when they've come out in these, these game 7s, and it's just been nervous and, kind of like the game 5 we saw against Ottawa. Stylistically, they're just not, they just don't have it in those big moments. And we don't know what's literally inside their minds, but it has certainly felt like some of all of this stuff has seeped into the players at times. And this version of the team, you don't get that sense. And to what degree that'll make a difference is going to be absolutely impossible to quantify. But there is something there. And speaking of, what will make a difference in the outcome, I think before we get out of here, we got to make some predictions accurate to our souls. I know we've been, I don't know, I think we've been kind of both positive and negative over the course of this podcast. I don't know exactly what folks are going to say. Anthony's coming off one successful prediction, so there's less pressure on him. We'll go around the horn. Anthony, what do you
Oh no,
think
I'm
is going to
pushing to
happen?
Alec first. Alec, I think is gonna
I think
lead.
I think I'm breaking up, guys. I'm gonna have to hang
Yeah,
up. No,
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I was leaning really positive throughout the podcast, which it made me look stupid. Um, I I keep coming back to special teams because I think the gap is much closer than people are recognizing at 5-on-5. I almost think the Leafs feel kind of semi-optimistic about the Leafs at 5-on-5 in terms of the actual goal scoring. I'm worried that they're going to get. I'm worried a little bit about what kind of the passivity that'll seep into their game when they're under pressure, and the fact that they sometimes don't just settle down and make a play with the puck on the breakout. What that actually looks like against Florida when they start to get on top of you and all you're really doing is dumping and changing, and then Florida's jamming it back down your throat, and like just the attrition of that over a 7-game series. If the Leafs don't figure that piece of it out, what that actually does to you. I do love the way the Leafs are defending their own net front. I thought their PK gave me as much optimism as anything going into this next series because I thought it was going to be the thing that if they were going to get upset by Senators, I thought it was going to be special teams related. Um, I'm going to say that the Leafs keep it roughly even on special teams and slightly edge them on 5-on-5. And they win it in 7.
Wow.
What a homer! What a homer! What a homer! Halfway through the first period, game 1, we'll see what this guy's saying. Nick, where are you at?
So two things. One, I think it's important to be intellectually honest here. And as much as like I can point to these edges that the Leafs have, like I've just, we've seen a lot of this matchup before. The depth of Florida up front, I have a hard time thinking the Leafs are going to win this. Now, when I say I don't think the Leafs are going to win this, a lot of people think that's like a 0 to 100 proposition. Like I think Florida is guaranteed to win this. Absolutely not. But I think it's more of a, I don't know, call it a 60-40. So I would say Florida in 6. That's very chalky. I think a lot of people are going to say that. But I kind of don't ever believe in picking a series to go to 7 because I feel like at that point you're just like calling it a coin flip. So like I could easily see this going 7. Like I do think it's going to be close. I don't think that they are doomed to lose a series. But like if you're putting a gun to my head, which is I guess I put the gun to my head because I asked for the predictions, I'm going to say Florida in 6, as disappointing as that is to say.
I was gonna say Florida in 6, but I don't respect your take about Game 7 at all.
Okay.
I think it's a pretty close. I think it's a pretty close series, maybe a little bit closer than people think it's gonna be. My biggest concern is breaking through Florida's top guys, and you could say, well, like, what are they paying for these? What are they paying these guys for? It's like we're not talking about like scoring against Shane Pinto. We're like, this is as good as it gets in the league right now. Like Barkov to me is the best two-way center in the league. Forsling is probably the best defensive defenseman or best shutdown defenseman in the league, whatever you want to
And
term him.
Lundell might be the best 3C.
Right? Like Bob is Bob. Like if that's what you're getting, like Reinhardt's like one of the better two-way right wingers in the league. I'm not saying I don't think he's the best, but I think he's one of the better ones. Like there's no shame in like people aren't going to hear it, but there's no shame in falling just short of those guys. Like this is like a really, really good Panthers team. So I'm worried about the ability to break through on those guys offensively. And then it becomes like, is your power play cooking against them and their PK is really good. Like it's a tall task. So that's where I have the Panthers right now. But like, I also don't know what the deal is with Kachuk. Like if Kachuk is going to continue to be a 13-minute guy, I might start shading more towards the Leafs. Like I think the Leafs could take advantage of that. But I'm just assuming that Kachuk is just going to get like healthier and better as things go along here. And Florida's been to the last 2 cups and won one. Like I don't like it, but they're good.
And I think also like that, the version of Matthews, which we've discussed Matthews a lot over the last few weeks, but when you talk about breaking through against Barkov and that first unit on Florida, that's easier to envision when you envision that kind of superhero level scorer version of Matthews. And as much as it was good to see him score in game 6 there, that's not really the version we seem to have at this particular moment in time. And that is a tricky thing because, again, scoring against those guys, as you mentioned, really, really hard. We're going to leave it there. We really appreciate everyone who listens in, watches now that we're on YouTube. We appreciate more when you leave comments, ratings, reviews, things that help the show grow, stay healthy. And we'll be back with you soon as the Toronto Maple Leafs take on the Florida Panthers in the second round.